What is a creepy story you haven't told many people? 1. This was over 10 years ago. I saw unexplained lights in the sky OMW home once. I was driving over a bridge and the lights were amber colored and my brain was like those are street lights, but as I got closer and drove under and past them I realized they were way up in the sky and were so not street lights. They were in a V formation but wiggling around in place sort of as they all glided in unison through the air. The V wasn't moving at its point though, it was drifting sideways. I know the lights were individual because I could see the sky and clouds behind them. Completely silent. It was nighttime. I was alone on the road. 2. Saw some dude hiding in a bush at the library. We made eye contact with each other but I barely reacted and hustled my butt home. Don't ask me why I reacted like that. I was a stupid scared kid. 3. Took a road trip in February many years ago to visit a friend and slept at a rest station in Ohio at night. I was freezing trying to sleep in my car so I pulled my beanie over my eyes to keep warm. I was desperate. I reclined and passed out. I woke up suddenly and pulled my hat up and some guy had froze mid-step walking towards my car. He was a foot away from the side mirror on my side of the car. His hands were in front of his body as if he were trying to walk gingerly. His eyes were wide and he quickly turned around and bolted into the bathroom when I started to sit up. Needless to say I didn't sleep for the rest of the drive. I forgot about it after that trip oddly enough, only remembering it a couple years later. Maybe he thought you were dead, and now he's somewhere in a similar thread telling a story about how he went to save a frozen corpse but it jolted alive at the last second. Sister, mother and I rented a holiday home that used to be an old coach house in Cape Town. My sister decided to go out with friends for the night. Later that evening we are getting ready to eat when we hear my sister's voice calling out to us to come to her room, like she wanted to show us something. My mom and I both froze and when I eventually turned to my mother she was pale as a sheet. She said to me in a clipped tone, "Don't acknowledge it." My mother is a staunch skeptic and her reaction, I think, frightened me more than the actual voice. When I was a preteen, I liked to rearrange my room a lot. This one particular time I moved my bed up against my wall facing the door to the hallway. Then I put the TV on the adjacent wall but facing at an angle so I could see it head on from my bed. Well, one night I had my light on and was watching a show. I go to turn the light off and lay in my bed. I then noticed on the one wall in the room that was blank, a shadow of a figure with a head and almost a full set of shoulders. It was about halfway up the wall, a little taller than I was at the time. I was just staring at it. I couldn't move. I finally got the courage to get up a little bit and see if anything was casting the shadow, but since I just rearranged the room, there was nothing between my TV and my bed. I put my hand out and it cast a shadow next to the head. I put my head up and it cast a shadow on the wall next to the other shadow too, but that shadow didn't move. I finally got up and turned the light on, then back off and the shadow was gone. Craziest thing ever. I immediately switched my room again and never saw it happen again. I was really young, toddler age, but I still remember all the details. Woke up and there were 3 shadows on the wall, a man in the middle with kids on each side holding hands. They let go and started waving to me, like a come here wave. Screamed and woke my mom up who flipped on the lamp and they were gone. I was walking home from the pub in my small town with my boyfriend and 3 friends. It was around midnight in the middle of the summer and while we had had a drink or so each we weren't drunk and were just chatting or looking at the stars. The particular bit of road we were on isn't very long but is quite old and narrow, so the pavement thin out a lot. We were walking in either twos or single file and to my right was a thick garden hedge. As this road is also along a hill, many of the gardens drop down a lot or have steep paths winding down to their front doors. Essentially to my right there was mostly hedge over this drop and not a lot else. At one of the breaks in the hedge where a front gate stood, in the corner of my eye I noticed something. It wasn't visible until the last moment but as I passed the gate I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I saw an old bearded man standing there at the gate staring out like a statue. He facing out towards the pavement and almost flush with the hedge. But that wasn't the weird part. As I passed this man, only a few inches from my face I realized he was wearing what looked like a bright yellow fisherman's hat. I passed him for maybe a few seconds and then, gone. As we filed past there was a lull in conversation and I felt myself shudder. Nobody else said anything but it was such a strange encounter that I couldn't shake it off for a bit. There was no reason for him to be stood there at midnight and he never moved. Even his expression was fixed and staring forward. We hadn't been making enough noise for someone to come out of their house to see what the fuss was or anything, and he had been so close when we all passed by. It was just so bizarre. The conversation struck back up again once the pavement became a little wider and we could walk alongside each other again. I started to relax and felt a bit more normal again. I wondered almost if I had imagined it until around 5 minutes later and much further on our way my friend asked me, "Did you see that guy earlier?" I once opened a closet and saw a human foot in there which then disappeared right in front of me. Later I found that the person who was next to me saw the same thing and just didn't say anything, and I didn't either. When I was about 11, I was home alone at night. I was walking from the kitchen to the stairway to head upstairs, and along the way, I had to pass the front door, which had windows on either side of it. As I was just starting up the stairs, there was a violent pounding on the front door, which was locked. I turned around to see a man outside pounding very forcefully and angrily on the door. He was wearing a black ski mask. To this day, I honestly cannot explain my behavior, but I just looked at him for a moment, and he looked at me, and then I slowly walked up the stairs as though nothing had happened. I didn't feel scared, just indifferent, like I knew nothing would come of it. The pounding stopped shortly after, and I never even told my parents about this when they got home. I don't know if I've ever told anyone, actually. Robber, open the door, you. Frick outta here, my grilled cheese is getting cold. Robber, sorry, I'll leave now. When I was about 5, a strange man followed me around in a clothes store. The faster I walked, he picked up speed as well. I eventually found my mom at the fitting room, and as soon as I turned around, he completely disappeared. When I was living in Brazil, there was this man we always saw when we drove by anywhere. He was always dressed up as Santa, but we didn't think anything about it because it was December. One day, our neighbors ran to our house, saying that they heard somebody walking inside. We called the cops, and when they entered their house, they found nothing except a sink that was turned on. They assumed the footsteps they heard was the water hitting the sink. When I was walking back to my house, I looked at the gate that was separating our houses, and I remember seeing that man, the one that was dressed as Santa, climbing the gate from my neighbor's house to ours. I don't remember anything else, but all those events are sealed inside my mind. I saw that guy on the Friday after next. So, it feels so cringe to talk about this. My house isn't haunted. Like there aren't random knocking sounds, ghostly whispers, or glasses flying off tables, but there have been some weird, unexplainable incidents. Pretty rare, but still spooky. The time I was sick, I had horrible abdominal cramps, so bad that I felt kinda out of it from the pain, and was lying in a groaning self-pity puddle on the floor. No fever, mind you, just pain. At one point, I glanced up at the sight of movement above me in my peripheral vision and saw what looked like two 50-60-ish aged men, dressed in historical garb, standing over me. They looked like they'd stepped out of a black and white TV, like grayscale. They seemed to be discussing me among themselves, since they'd keep pausing to stare down at me with very lofty, disdainful looks before returning to their conversation. But it was as if they were on mute. There was no sound at all. My reaction amounted to, sure, okay, whatever, I guess. It didn't strike me as that weird, which is weird in and of itself. After a few minutes, I look back up and they're gone. Welp. After I felt better, I kept thinking about it. I wasn't having a fever dream. I just felt a bit out of it. My area used to be heavy-duty Dutch settler territory, and when I looked up pictures of the period clothing, yep, we've got a match. And their appearance, all grey, no sound, reminded me of other descriptions I'd heard of ghosts. So, yeah, part of me still wonders if I had two snobby Dutch colonialist ghosts watching me groan and writhe on the floor like, why I never look at this trollop, how utterly pathetic. We had a really fun night outside, eating in a fancy restaurant and going clothing shopping I believe, and we all craved for some ice cream. There was a really close sweets place near our house, but since we were outside and far away, we decided to go to another one that was near the main road. We were in our car, driving to our destination until we stopped cause there was traffic. I was confused because it was in the middle of the night, not to mention it was either a Wednesday or a Thursday, so I didn't expect to see a traffic. The main road had an open field just near where we were located. I saw a shirtless man in the middle of the green field. The area was surrounded by police vehicles. The man was bloodied up and he had his back turned towards us. He had a knife in his hands. He was cutting himself. I didn't know what was happening. I was 12 years old. My parents didn't pay any mind to it, maybe because my father is a doctor and my mother is a nurse, so they see cases like this a lot. My brother was visibly shocked as well and drove off. It was on the news 2 days later. Turns out the man tried to overdose but couldn't, but he used so much he couldn't tell his surroundings or the pain. He was numb. It was a creepy scene for me because I was 12 and it was dark. The only light was coming from the police vehicles and it was directed at the said guy. So the only view I had was this dark place, but a light was shining. But the light shining towards was a dying man. I reckon that none of my parents or my brother remember this, and I never told them how much this affected me. When I was about 19, I worked in a bar. Several of the customers would ask me how I was always there when I also worked at the casino. Whenever I heard this, I always told them, "No, I don't work at the casino. That's someone else." A few people didn't believe me, but I didn't press the issue because I honestly felt a little annoyed at the idea that someone looks exactly like me. A few years later, when I was a senior in university, someone sent me someone's Instagram. It was definitely the guy. Not only did he look like me, it was me, but he was wearing things I didn't own, doing things I hadn't done. It felt violating. One of the weirdest things was, at the time I was in a gay relationship with a slightly older black guy, and, of course, so was he. His boyfriend looked very similar to mine, but not identical in the way I was to my imposter. Maybe ask your parents if you have any relatives you're not aware of, like a lost cousin. If not, you just stumbled upon your doppelganger. Funny enough, I worked with 2 guys which this was the case. No relation, looked alike, and ended up working in the same company in one department. I have a love-hate relationship with a full-body mirror my stepmother owns. Lately there has been some interesting paranormal activity revolving that mirror. IDK how it started, but I have a little story. IDK if I was hallucinating. IDK but it kinda creeped me out. So I was hanging out with my stepmom the other day. She has given me some clothes and all to try, so I did. After a while she left me alone to do something and I went over to the mirror and looked at my reflection, seeing if the outfit suited me or not, and I swear, I really do. I suddenly saw my reflection give this loopy smile and it caught me off guard because I didn't do anything or did any goody faces to the mirror. It gave me the chills and I bolted out of there. Don't put too much mind to it, but that mirror is now covered due to other wacky stuff occurring, lol. Mirrors are one of my biggest fears. I won't have one in my room because I can't sleep with it being there. Just a background for this story. I live in a house that me and many others including my family members believe is haunted. I am the one that has had the most paranormal experiences out of everyone I know, so most things don't creep me out, but the story I'm about to tell still gives me chills. Okay, so this happened a few months ago. It was around 2:30 AM and I was planning on just pulling an all-nighter because I had to be up early the next morning anyway. I got up to use the bathroom, making sure to be quiet so I didn't wake anybody up. After I was done in the bathroom, I checked the top floor of my house to make sure everyone was still asleep. My mom was asleep in her room and I could hear my older brother snoring in his room. I returned to my room and shut and locked the door behind me as per usual. About 10 seconds later, I hear my mom call my name from her room. I got scared because I knew she was going to be pissed that I was up this late. I yelled out "what" without even getting out of bed. There was no answer, so I called out one more time and still nothing. I thought maybe she had just wanted to see if it was me or my brother that used the bathroom. About 15 seconds after she had initially called my name, I heard her scream my name from right outside my door. I'm talking yelling at the top of her lungs as if I had done something horrible. I hadn't heard her get out of bed and walk over to my door, so I was already freaked out just from the jump scare. I answered "what" one more time with no answer. I got out of bed and opened my door to nothing. My mom was dead asleep in her room. She has a very distinct voice, so I couldn't have mistaken it for anything else. That was definitely her voice calling me from right outside my room, but to the best of my knowledge it wasn't coming from her. That last October in my old apartment I shared with a roommate, we kept hearing a man in our apartment that wasn't really there. Then one day my brave roommate bravely opened her door after hearing commotion in the kitchen, gun in hand, to see a shadow creature perched on our countertop only to disappear after she turned on the light. I asked her to describe what she saw, but she said she was too frightened to. On the nights I had to be in the apartment alone, I would leave every light on out of fear. So glad I don't live there anymore. A few years ago I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere it took a while for them to arrive and it got dark and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards I had dreams about him and he would talk to me and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. I'm sorry you went through that. I think it's commendable that you waited there and helped them find his body. If it helps at all, I bet he wouldn't have been upset with you in real life. He'd probably be grateful that someone actually cared that much to wait with him. My mom has a brother and sister. Her sister had a daughter I'm close in age to, and her brother had a baby when we were 9/10. I had a dream that our new baby cousin was begging me for help and crying. The girl cousin I was close to had the exact same dream at the same time. We never told anyone. A couple of years later, uncle and his wife had a nasty divorce. Wife drugged our cousin because he couldn't sit still and leave her alone for 8 hours. I remember him crying after taking Ritalin because his head hurt and he didn't feel right. There was nothing I could do then, but always wondered if it would have been different if we had spoke up. I once dreamed I was hovering around my front yard. Everything was normal and in place, unlike most of my dreams. Then as I approached the entrance on the side of the house, I noticed the door was open. So I looked and I could see my room and me asleep there. I immediately woke up. Next thing I do is to look at that door, visible from my room, and to my surprise I noticed it was actually open. At like 3 AM and everything was pitch black outside. I went slowly to see if I could close it while making sure I didn't hear anyone else inside the house. Once I reached the entrance I looked outside both ways and saw nothing or heard nothing. I just closed it and went back to sleep. When I was deep into alcoholism, my sleep paralysis demon was a stone gargoyle bee who would perch on objects in my room just outside my vision and just recite all the awful facts about my personality and how horrible I am. If I managed to look at her, she'd blink, teleport to somewhere else just out of vision and keep crap talking. When I weaned off alcoholism, I would have seizures in my sleep and wake up with marks on my throat. I lived alone, so either I was clawing at my own neck, or SGB was trying to kill me. I'm not a classical recovering alcoholic. I enjoy a good IPA and cocktails from time to time, but I don't get blackout drunk anymore. But Stone Gargoyle Bee hasn't visited my nightmares since I stopped hardcore drinking. Brutal. When I was 17 years old and driving at night with friends and we ended up getting cornered in a street by a car that was following us. It was 4 guys wearing American president masks and then they drove off. Creepy at the time as it was 3 AM. Back off, war child, seriously. As a kid my friend, sister and I found knives and a cleaver in a forest where we were almost kidnapped by a homeless dude a few days prior. We were 3 little girls and he said something cliche along the lines of I have puppies, wanna see them, and actually me and my friend wanted to go with him but my sister who was a year older stopped up from doing so. If she hadn't been there my friend would most likely not be here today. Nothing seemed creepy until 2 weeks ago when it touched me. One night I came back and went to bed. but before I did I remember feeling this odd feeling like someone was watching me. I put it off thinking I was just tired. Fast forward to about 8 AM and I have this dream that I'm being chased by this ghostly looking woman and I was stuck in my bed. When I woke up I had a bloody nose. I put this off thinking it's one of those dreams. Next night I come home late and I go to bed. But when I'm sleeping I get woken up with a sense that I'm being watched again. When I woke up I was rolled away from my girlfriend and decided to roll over to face her. When I did she was gone and I see a dark shadowy figure walking over to me that looked like my girlfriend, and she reached out to me, or I thought. My girlfriend who just woke up next to me thirsty for water, lifted her head up that was tucked under her pillow to get water. I flipped out, going from a sleepy state to fully awake and adrenaline coursing through me, explaining to my girlfriend what just happened. Anyways I ended up just getting up and starting my day a little earlier than normal. The night after I'm off home from work and go to bed early with my girlfriend. We are cuddling and fall asleep. I don't know what it was, but my toe was grabbed like in a way to pull up the sheet and my foot. I kicked and sprang up thinking someone was at the edge of my bed. My girlfriend who was watching TikToks on my chest also what happened because she was laying on top of me before I sprung up. The room was empty. We saged our apartment. This isn't the first time something like this has happened but dang was it defiantly one of the craziest. There was a man that was not a good person and he was manipulating people in an attempt to get rich in very unethical ways. My wife and I were disconnecting ourselves from the whole scene, and I prayed that God would stop the man from taking advantage of people. Less than 6 months later, he died during a routine surgery. My parents used to come in and tuck me in when I'd wake up in the middle of the night. The only thing is that it even happened when one of them was away, and they would always come into the room, regardless of time, in perfect church clothes. They would both come in the room. I'd just kind of play along, but I knew it wasn't them. After a while it stopped. I thought that whoever it was figured out that I knew. I was watching TV late at night when I felt a tingle go up my spine. It vanished as it got up to my neck and I was about to forget about it when it suddenly emerged again going down my face. Only then did I realize it was a big butt spider. I live on a small farm in South Texas, about 40 acres, and one time at about 1 o'clock in the morning, my entire family and I heard a woman scream from somewhere behind our house. Like this shrill shriek, our neighbors, who also live on a considerable amount of land, were on vacation and our neighbor on the other two sides is a nearly 700-acre ranch. My dad went out with a flashlight and a gun but couldn't find anything. The following dawn we found out it was a mountain lion imitating a scream before it ate some of our goats and dragged one into its cave. Reply, share. Reply, share. My long-term partner has an older brother, I'll call him Roy. Roy has failed to thrive. He's 33, doesn't work, dropped out of university twice because he played video games instead of doing the work, has never been in a relationship, doesn't have a single friend, still lives at home with mum etc. I want to emphasize that none of these things are a problem in itself, except Roy is a freaking butthole. He's arrogant, believes he's smarter than everyone else, is a misogynist, and has exhibited some behavior that leads me to believe he's a racist. He recently came out as an anti-masker anti-vaxxer, and on the rare occasion he does go outside he walks around with one of those dickhead mask exemption lanyards he ordered off eBay. His life revolves around Nintendo products and American right-wing politics. We're British. He has 4,000 plus games purchased via Steam, and he keeps every one of them installed on various connected hard drives at all times. I only know this because it's a bragging point for him. One day he went out with his mum to go food shopping, and we sneaked into his room, cause we wanted to see how bad it had gotten. Every space had been occupied by shoulder height boxes of crap that there was now just a narrow walkway from his bed to his PC to the door. The enormous Amiibo collection he kept in a glass front cabinet. Every single one had been turned around so that their eyes faced the back of the cabinet. This wasn't just 8 Amiibos or something. There were dozens of these things, all deliberately turned away from the glass at precise angles. We just kind of looked at each other nervously, confirming that we were seeing what we were actually seeing, and turned and walked out the room again. I refuse to sleep under the same roof as him because I genuinely don't feel safe around him at this stage. he is checking every box for is going to have a psychotic break and stab everyone in the household. There's a large windmill along the river in Mom's hometown that was once used to pump water. The windmill house had been locked and the mechanism shut down when it was no longer needed for pumping. As I once described, people would gather there at night to hang out. The creepy part was that although the enormous blades hadn't rotated in several years, they'd suddenly start churning in the darkness. Even though the air was still, the blades were never seen rotating during the day or during windy conditions, just randomly at night. When the air was still, it was eerie in the moonlight to see the blades casting long shadows on those gathered near the mill. This creeped me right the frick out even though it's 9:30 AM and the sun is shining. Well done. Less full on creepy but still unusual. When I was 6 years old I suffered from a brain tumor. It was successfully operated on and my neurosurgeon became a family friend. Years later she revealed that because of my tumor's relative rarity in the technicality of operation, it had been recorded. My parents had consented at the time but never gave it much thought afterwards. I asked her to get me a copy and after she had retired I finally got hold of the tape. And so at age 19 I got to watch a training video featuring my 6-year self being operated on, including very interesting close-up footage of my own brain. I was by the beach at night and it was a full moon. I was with some friends and one of them points to something in the water. It was a massive form bobbing in the water. We thought it was just a large shadow caused by the moon and clouds but it kept going back and forth still bobbing. Its distance to us was about 100 and its size was close to a whale. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.